The engine has been in this Xterra for 180,000 miles and it doesn't want to come out without a fight. I had to make a tool, break 20 years of rust loose to free it from the motor mounts and spill more coolant. But the hoist is hooked up and the engine is finally coming out.
So last time we were working on the Xterra, we got all the transmission bell housing bolts out. We got the engine hoist hooked up. We got the starter out, and we got the little transmission bell housing brace mounts out. So right now the engine is unhooked from the transmission. All we have to do is undo the torque converter, undo the motor mounts, and make sure that this truck has no other wires around it, because we also did that last episode. But I've never pulled a VG33E, better known as the 3.3 liter V6 in the first gen Xterra. And I want to make sure that I'm not missing something and creating more work for myself. So yeah, I'm going to get underneath there and start getting the torque converter undone, because that is the part I'm looking forward to the least. The thing I'm looking forward to the most is hooking the hoist up and getting it out. But because I have a rear main seal that's been puking oil for 50,000 miles, the back of this motor is disgusting. Now I got to get all my tools back out because I got busy and I put everything away. And I had a pretty good selection of various 14 millimeter sockets and wrenches and ratcheted wrenches and different angle wrenches and you name it, because a lot of the hardware underneath seemed to be 14 millimeters. The torque converter is accessible through the hole for the starter. So what I'm doing now is I'm going to go ahead and put the crank bolt back in, so that way I can turn the engine over with a big ratcheting wrench and see where the torque converter bolts, when they come around and they're accessible, then I can get them right where I want them to with the actual flywheel wrench. So the crankshaft bolt is actually a 27 millimeter socket. It's pretty big.
As I go to turn the engine over to get the torque converter bolts to peek through the access cover, I hear a drip noise. Look underneath and I see coolant just coming out of my driver's side exhaust manifold. After several turns on the crank, I finally see my torque converter bolts. With plenty of access coming from the front of the engine, I used a long extension and my impact gun to break the torque converter bolts loose.
Here's the bottom part of the flex plate that I didn't get on camera pulling out of the truck. But if you're behind the engine and transmission, it literally just slides out. It's sandwiched on the bottom portion between the engine and the transmission, and the upper stiffener or upper flex plate is right above it. That actually has dowel pins and it's stuck to it. And you can get it out once you have the engine out. And this gives you access to the actual torque converter bolts, because right now, this is to hold the starter in place and keep it nice and secure. When you go and take this out, you widen that whole diameter of the opening so you can get a socket on it. And what I did, and I showed you in the video, was I couldn't get my flywheel wrench on the flywheel. And that's fine. This actually worked out a lot better. I just fished a long extension with a flex joint and a 14 millimeter standard socket impact, and ran it in there, and just, they came off no problem. And they are really short bolts. So when you go through and bust these things off, if you use an impact gun, I mean, they're gonna come off so easy. I don't know what the torque spec is to hold these on, but these seem like they just flew right off. So, and I didn't have this impact gun turned up that high either. And so, yeah, I've got the torque converters all undone from the flywheel. Go in there, wiggle your fingers in underneath the flywheel and spin the torque converter freely to make sure it's free before you start pulling it out. I think all I've got left now is the motor mounts. And then I'm just going to do a really quick once over on all around the engine to look for any kind of grounds or any coolant lines I missed. Whatever's going on with the coolant issue is pretty bad, as you saw in the video. Right when I turned the engine over, like hardly at all. Like I moved my 1/2 inch wrench like 2 inches. It just started spitting coolant out of the driver's side exhaust bank. That's not good. And it put a whole entire massive puddle on the floor too. So whatever was leaking really, really bad. Well, we're gonna find out how bad it was once we get it out. Okay, I'm gonna get back to it and get this thing out.
The motor mount studs on the driver's side have very little clearance to get a tool in and break them free due to the front differential sitting just below them. I need to use a 6-point socket with the angle of a wrench, so I used a pass-through socket combined with a 3/4 inch wrench. This seemed to work very well at first until I ran into a clearance issue with the front diff once the nut started backing off.
I ran into an issue. My little makeshift tool I was using, which is nothing more than a 3/4 inch wrench and my pass-through socket, doesn't have enough clearance. And I need to use a 6-point because my nut is extremely rusty and corroded. It actually is on the verge of stripping, so I'm being very careful. I've just about got it off. I've got like one more thread, and I'm hoping once I get that off, I'll be able to at least get some kind of combination wrench that ratchets in there and get it off a lot easier. So I got to make a tool. And what I did, and what I'm going to do, is I went down to the hardware store, to Lowe's, picked up a wrench and a socket. And I'm going to make a low profile version of what I've been using. I only need like 3/8 of an inch. Well, not even 3/8. No, excuse me. I need like 3/16 of an inch to get this thing to break loose. And then hopefully I'll be able to get it off. There's a part of me that while I was under there, I was hoping that the bolt would break or the stud would, because I'm going to replace the motor mounts anyways. So yeah, I'm going to make this tool really quick, get back in there and hopefully get that off. And then I can use this on the other side and also to reinstall the Xterra. And if I get any other Xterras, I will have a motor mount tool. So let's get to welding.
Most hand tools are chrome vanadium, which is a composite alloy. I've learned over the years when welding hand tools to try and weld tools together from the same manufacturer, since not all tools have the same alloy composition. Ideally, you don't have to weld hand tools together, but if you do, get them from the same brand. This Xterra motor mount tool is all Craftsman. Once the new tool was done cooling, I got back under the truck and put it to the test. And it worked just like I thought it would. Basically just like the previous makeshift pass-through socket wrench combo I was using. But the new additional clearance gained really helped me get more turns on this nut. But even then I can feel it starting to round. And let me tell you, like while I'm under here doing this, I'm looking at how I'm going to extract this motor mount out, and it's getting a little worrisome. So I ended up having to move to vice grips for the last final 2 turns of this nut. After about 2 turns with the vice grips, I felt the nut break loose, and what a relief. I was able to get this thing off with my fingers and move on to the next motor mounts. Unlike the driver's side, the passenger side has plenty of clearance to get a ratchet wrench and a 14mm socket right underneath there, and these came off in like 30 seconds. These were super easy compared to the driver's side.
Okay, I've got all the motor mounts have all the nuts off the studs. Mine were very difficult. I think that my difficulties were a special circumstance of spending some time up here in the Great North Rust Belt, but living most of its life down south and being deceivingly rusty. On those bolts, at least. They're forward-facing down, straight down, exposed to all the elements on the road salt, road debris, water. So those definitely can get nasty pretty easy. I would say even in the southeast, you could probably have some rust on those. So you need to take your time and be very patient, which is exactly what I did. And it took forever because I basically had to back the nut off and then tighten it back up, hit it with some PB Blaster, wire brush it, PB Blaster it, move it farther down. I finally got them all off. I was ready to start cutting once I could get to a point and lift the motor up high enough to get Sawzall right underneath where the motor mount is, but luckily I don't have to. I've got one more wire that I need to, or area that I need to unbolt a wire retaining bracket that holds the O2 sensor wire, as well as I think some other wires, but I don't know. I'll show you real quick. It's on the passenger side, just behind the passenger cylinder head. So you can see that wire, it's clipped right down here. There's where my finger is going is a little 10 millimeter bolt. And there's, I think, a stud with a nut just to the side of it. So that's got to come off. And then this motor is free. At least I think it's free. And I'll know right away when I start putting some pressure on the engine hoist. I'm gonna get that wire undone and get this thing set up to lift out of the engine. I can't stress enough the importance of being patient and thorough and paying attention to details. Now, I went through and I want to show you two things. I went through and took my time and just pulled all the wires and tried to kind of hang them up and spread them out up and away from the motor. No, specific procedure for this, just kind of common sense. And then you're going to want to pay attention to all that area in the back when you start lifting this thing up. Like I've got this wire dangling over the front I didn't get yet. There we go. Now that's out. You're going to have some power steering hoses on this side, as well as some grounds and power cords, but you can see they got plenty of room. And the reason I mentioned taking your time and just paying attention to detail and going over it again once you think it's done is I almost forgot to disconnect this little diff breather tube running up from the front differential through a soft line to a hard line mounted on the engine. That's at the very bottom. A lot of exciting things happen when you start pulling the motor out, and I'm sure that would probably mangle those hard lines, and who cares about the soft line? The hard lines are probably OEM parts you have to buy from the dealer. So I think once I get that breather line disconnected, the engine's finally ready to come out. So I'm going to do that, and then I'm going to get set up to pull this engine out. Okay, I got the hoist all set up. Eyeballing my workspace right here where I'm at. I think I've got enough room. I'm confident I have enough room, but you could very well see me lift this engine up, only to have to put it back down and move the Xterra back by pushing it. I'd be lying if I said I haven't had to do that before, but it's also why I'm not too worried about running into that issue. Take our time, start working up. Got just a little bit of tension on it right now. I think it's free. Whoa, we're free. All right, I think it's legitimately free. It's just angled. I don't like the angle with it. I do still have my condenser inside here. I've got plenty of space, but I'm being very careful I don't crush the front of it. Just got to clear the hood, get it on the stand, and it's good. Putting it in will be way easier because I will enhance the provisions for hooking up to the engine with a hoist. This was not an ideal angle for it to come out, but who cares? Now I hope I have enough lift with my hoist because the Xterra doesn't have, as I was saying, the Xterra doesn't have much of a lift, but it has a little bit of a lift. I'm not above letting air out of the tires, which is I'm about to do right now. I kind of feel like it would only be fitting with this engine removal and on this vehicle for something weird to happen right in the final moments. So all I'm doing is taking off the passenger side motor mount so that I can use my engine tilt to get this thing angled and get that oil pan up and over the front cross member. Actually, my front bumper. Engine mounts are actually in pretty good shape, minus the rusty studs. I do have enough clearance. So now I'm gonna adjust my leveler. Okay, whoa. Got some coolant. Almost. That's like almost there. Let's see what that does. I think that's gonna clear. Maybe. Well, I might have to like lift it up a little bit, but my hood latch, there we go. Looks like that's coming over. Come on. Come on. Come on. Oh, and we're over. Whoop. Lower it down and get it on the stand. And then re-angle it a little bit because it's a little crazy right now. Woo. Oop. All right. All right, still got to get the flex plate off, or not the flex plate, the flywheel. Flywheel is pretty simple to remove. Just got these 6 bolts on the rear. This is where the little impact's handy. 14 millimeters. Whoop. Stinks. All the rear main seal oil is like baked in the bottom of this. Whoop. All right. Gonna want to keep that. All right, get the flex plate off, and then there's some crud on here. It's pretty normal. Just work it off. There we go. I'm gonna get this thing situated, get it on the engine stand, and get everything set up to tear into this, conduct an autopsy, and figure out why I have coolant coming out of my driver's side exhaust bank. Who knows? Whatever's wrong with it doesn't matter because a good engine's going back in, whether it's this one or another engine. I hope you found this helpful if you're going to tear into your own project vehicle and remove its engine, or if you're working on an Xterra, especially a first gen or a Frontier. Not a whole lot is on the internet about these trucks, and they're pretty cool trucks. All right, got my first Xterra engine removal in the books. Now I may have my first Xterra engine rebuild in the books. We'll see. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next time.